Western Ag Network on the road at the Montana Stockgrowers Association Convention. Brought to you by Torgeson's Equipment.
Well, hi everyone. I'm Russell Nemetz from the Western Ag Network, and it's time for On the Road. In fact, today finds us in Billings for the Montana Stockgrowers Association's annual convention. And I'm lucky enough to be part of a panel this afternoon. Just one of the many highlights here at this year's Montana Stockgrowers Association Convention, a topic that is very near and dear to cattlemen across Big Sky Country and certainly beyond. Producer profitability. Now, here in just a minute or so, I will introduce the panelists. We have three very well-known cattle producers from across America joining us here in Billings this week to talk about this very important topic, producer profitability, kind of taking a deep dive, if you will, but to set the stage. You know, I truly believe every once in a while, maybe once in a lifetime, an industry is given the opportunity to take a pause, to take a breath, take a deep dive and a hard look at itself, and maybe, just maybe, reinvent itself, not just for the longevity and the sustainability of right now, but maybe, more importantly, for the future generation. And I believe the timing is absolutely perfect right now, not just for Montana's beef cattle industry, but certainly the beef cattle industry across this great country of ours. And it's time, I believe, to maybe set aside our differences here in this industry, some of those more controversial issues, put them aside, get back to the grassroots foundation of what made this industry in the first place, and most importantly, start talking with a unified voice, not just for right now, but for the future of the U.S. beef cattle industry. And with that, I'd just like to introduce our panel. And we have Turk Stovall with us, Stovall Ranches, Yellowstone cattle feeders, and of course he's the Montana Stockgrowers Association's second vice president. We also have Rusty Ellis with 21 Cattle Company joining us as part of this panel. And all the way in town from Galt, California is Jake Parnell. He and his family ranch in California. They also own an auction market there, and of course he's representing the Livestock Marketing Association as part of this panel. Gentlemen, thank you for being part of this Montana Stockgrowers Association Producer Profitability panel. And as I kind of set the stage, this is a huge topic, but before we take that deep dive, why don't each of you just tell us a little bit about yourselves, your family, and your ag operation where you each hail from?
Well, yeah, thank you, Russell, and thanks for the opportunity to come and visit today. You know, our family ranches south of Billings, and we have some deep roots here in Montana. I'd be a fifth-generation Montana rancher. My family actually originally came in with John Bozeman in 1864, and we've seen a lot of changes, and there's a lot of stories of good times and bad times, but fortunately, we're still here. I'm ranching with my wife and my three kids, and we have ranches south of Billings, and we also own a feed yard in Shepherd, Montana.
Very good. Rusty, you're from this part of the world too. Tell us a little about your family and your ag operations here in south central Montana.
Hi, I'm Russell, and thank you. I'm a fourth generation rancher here in the state. I ranch with my wife, and my oldest son's involved in the project. My younger two are involved part as time allows. It's a cow-calf background and operation and pretty standard stuff.
Absolutely. Well, we're tickled to have you here as well. And as I mentioned in the open, we also have Jake Parnell, a cattleman from California, joining us. And of course, in the cattle business, we wouldn't be much without our auction markets across America, and of course our auctioneers that help us get those animals we're raising on these ranches in places like Big Sky Country to market. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what it's like to be in the cattle business and an auction market owner from there in Central California.
I could hear everybody in the room say California when you introduced me, but it certainly is a privilege to be with you. Jake Parnell, I live in Sacramento, California. My wife and I own Cattlemen's Livestock Market in Galt, California. We have 3 young children. We also ranch, third-generation ranching family, run a few commercial cows, and have a small purebred operation as well. And kind of over the years have tried to take a fairly active role both politically and in the production side of agriculture. And one thing a lot of people don't think about when they think about the bad things when they think about California, and we do have a lot of good things there. Our production agriculture is amazing. Maybe not cow country like this part of the world, but we're down there where a lot of the people are, where a lot of the consumers are, and have a pretty good idea of what the people want. So it's certainly a privilege for me to be here. I think that producer profitability, the unification of this industry, is something so important, and I love to be here to talk about it.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about for the next 45 minutes, and we are tickled to have you here in Montana. I know those of us from Montana, I bet, are thinking the same thing I am right now. I can't even imagine what it's like to be in production agriculture these days in a state like California, as hard as it is to keep Montana's #1 and most essential industry, agriculture, going. Producer profitability, Turk. It's a big, big topic here at this convention, and certainly one we've been talking a lot about here of late. It's easy to talk about producer profitability when we have record high cattle prices, but we know the cycle's going to change. We know we're going to have challenges from Mother Nature again. What does producer profitability mean to you?
Well, thanks, Russell. So, you can deep dive into so many different topics on producer profitability, but obviously there's several things that go into that, and it's for sure costs. But the one thing that I always think about is how do a young person get into this business? And when we look back, really over, especially since the COVID years, a lot of things have changed, and we're faced with a lot of challenges. But then all of a sudden, we have cattle sold, but we can't ship them, because the feed yard can't take them, because the feed yard can't deliver. We've brought up some new discussions here in the last 3 to 5 years that I don't think any of us could have dreamed of. And so we're realizing, my goodness, there are some new forces out there that we're having to deal with just to only survive, let alone be profitable. But things that I think about is access to capital. Can a young person get finance to do this? I think about access to land. Just here in our great state of Montana, we're seeing this state change. We're one of the fastest growing states in the country right now. And, it just so happens, I don't think it's because there's more ranchers coming in the state. We're competing with more recreation. And so where are we going to get the grasslands to run these herds? And are we ever even going to be able to afford to buy them? And so those are some of the topics that I really think about. And Jake talked about this unity. At some point, we do have to come together as an industry and start getting it down to topics that are really going to matter and make a difference. And that's what I hope we can get into today.
Well, I think we're going to have a great discussion on that topic, or topics, and some more. Rusty, what does producer profitability mean to you from your eyes?
Well, of course, everything that Turk mentioned is paramount, but another factor that we have to look at is our silent partner in this thing, and that's Uncle Sam. And it doesn't matter whether it's yearly or when we hand this to the next generation. The changes that are coming make those changes incredibly difficult. And if these kids are going to have a shot and be able to move forward with this industry and the security of arguably the nation and its food supply, we have to be able to move the asset from the current generation to the next, and there has to be enough there that they have the ability to carry the flag forward. Look around this room, there are a tremendous amount of kids that are just begging for a shot, and we've got to figure out how to make that happen. And it's not a local problem, it's not a Montana problem, it's a nation problem. And we have to address, amongst a million other things, the silent partner in the room and how on earth we deal with him, because that gets more difficult every day.
It sure does, and as I said during the open, I mean, it's time for this beef cattle industry to really set some of those controversial issues that have truly divided us all for as long as I can remember. Not say put them away forever, because they're important topics, and we don't want to take that away from any one organization out there. However, we're not going to have to worry about talking about those issues if we don't have men and women on the ground in these cattle operations wherever they call home. And I joked about it, Jake, but I can't even imagine really what it's like. I mean, just what we hear and what we see and what we read from some of our more urban states out there, albeit one of the largest agricultural states in the Union, California.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think this all became a priority to me kind of at the latter stages of COVID, and then the entire country seemed to go through those different drought periods. And as a livestock market operator on a daily basis, you're talking to producers. Producers call. They want to talk about the weather, genetics, their new grandchild that was born. And you start talking about it, and the conversation turned into, how am I going to remain profitable? And there's two things that have happened that are kind of the detriment to this industry back to back, right? We had a drought and low markets, and now we've got really high markets. Those are the two times when people want to retire. And where ranches start to get sold. And when this conversation came up, amongst my producers and within the LMA a little bit, and started to gain some steam, I realized that each of us can have our differences. NCBA has their priorities in animal ID and disease traceability. RCAF and U.S. cattle feeders have cool and fed cattle marketing. LMA has got its sale yard priorities. The Farm Bureau and the Farmers Union have their priorities. Those are such a small piece that we seem to spend more time talking about than we do talking about all the stuff we agree on. And the most important thing, and Rusty just mentioned it alluded to it, is this idea of producer profitability and our nation's food supply. If we cannot keep young people, and in my state, I see it every day. We started a nonprofit trying to keep young people in California, the California Youth Ag Expo, because all of the good, talented young people, they go to Oklahoma or Texas, they go to the Midwest, they come to Bozeman or University of Montana, and then they stay because they like these other states so much. And they're leaving one of the most fertile places in the world to come, but why go back and try to do business there? Because there's no way to be profitable with $30,000 an acre farmland. How can you come back and run a cow on that or run a sheep on that? And so this conversation is so important to me because I've got young children. I've grown up and believe in American agriculture. And I think that if we sit back and think about it, it is our biggest national security issue. We're a world superpower for two reasons. We've got a good military and we can feed our people cheaply and nutritiously. And if we allow other organizations and government to push us out, we've got big problems in the near future. And this is a movement that I think we need to all unite behind. It's a grassroots movement, and we can all come together, every one of these organizations, to come behind the idea of this producer profitability. Some of these great ideas we'll talk about later today and move on to the future.
Absolutely. Turk, during the luncheon, I kind of leaned over when they were introducing and recognizing those young people for their efforts in the beef cattle industry here in Montana. I said, isn't that really cool to have these young people in some pretty good numbers here at the Montana Stockgrowers Association convention? Isn't that cool? Well, the Montana Stockgrowers Association, along with its foundation, truly is trying to make young people a bigger and bigger priority of your overall mission. And that's why this producer profitability panel really kind of took its own feet and was a seed and started to grow. And then you guys have really taken this very serious about having this panel here this afternoon. But at the end of the day, we want to use this kind of as a launch pad, if you will, for the entire industry, right? To kind of serve as a roadmap for getting us back to producer profitability when times aren't so good, and when we can speak with a united voice and really tackle all of those important issues.
Absolutely. It seems to be we're in a political environment that we just like to always talk about what we don't agree upon with each other, and we don't really spend any time talking about what we do agree upon and how can we get a win. How can we stop being in a defensive mode and get into an offensive mode and really try to go out and say, hey, I think these things can really make a difference in bringing this next generation back. The one thing through these conversations it's really been the past several years, amongst Montana Stockgrowers members is, the one thing that we did find out, and I hate to say this is even a good thing, but we found out that we're essential. And when we all got the letter, and those of us that have feed yards, we got a letter out saying, you know what, you're an essential business. Well, we already knew we were an essential business because we still had to feed the cattle. You know, and so it really even made me start to thinking about, you know what, it is a national security issue. Because when we come down and have all these things facing us, we still have to show up for our job. Because we are shepherds of animals, and we have to make it happen. And that really made me thinking, you know what, I need to think a little bit different about this. And how do we get this next generation involved and create a platform for them to really prevail? And how can we create more unity in our industry so we can work more together? Because the last thing we want to do is confuse our politicians. And if we're all coming to Capitol Hill with different agendas, golly, can you imagine what are you supposed to do for that beef industry? And so let's try to get a unified voice, and let's really take this serious of getting our next generation involved.
Well, absolutely. You know, there weren't very many positives that came out of the pandemic, but as you just mentioned, you know, making Americans across the country realize just how lucky they are to have this safe, abundant, and truly affordable food supply at their disposal every single day was one of the benefits. But it also highlighted the need for industries like the cattle and beef industry to really tout ourselves and to get better at telling our stories. And as you mentioned, I mean, educating our lawmakers. They're changing every single year or every other year in states like Montana, not just within our borders, but, you know, on the federal level too. Rusty, I mean, as we talk about one of those issues, you kind of mentioned it earlier, I think, the estate tax, the death tax. I mean, if there is one issue out there that impacts every agricultural business and small business, not just here in Montana, but across America, it is certainly the estate tax, isn't it?
It is, and there's no question that Congress is really good at doing nothing. And the bottom line is that's all they have to do to revert us back to our previous levels of exemption. Now, there's plenty of force, some would call them our enemies, and I don't know that they're far wrong, that would like to take this back to a 2009 level. If we do that in this country, it not only affects everybody in this room, but I don't care what town you're from in Montana, it affects almost every business on Main Street. This is not just an us problem. It's huge, and government gets, in my humble opinion, a big enough cut as it is. But through our discussions and everybody gathered around a table, and there's been a pile of us in this process, we found out some kind of interesting things, that we have some allies now generated by COVID, believe it or not, that these inner city legislators that were not necessarily agriculture's best friend have got enough noise from home that the food insecurity thing really matters. And this is a chance, I think, probably a once-in-a-generational chance, to push this to the front of the agenda and get some real meaningful tax legislation done, not only on the death tax, but on a lot of it. And frankly, without those steps, the next generation has some real difficulties even starting.
Jake, how important is it from your standpoint, from one of the more urban states out there where we always have a lot of interesting politics coming out of states like California, New York, and some of those others where it's always an uphill battle, it seems, to educate those lawmakers about the importance of agriculture and where their food and fiber comes from. And so talk about that, and then also, you know, kind of following up Rusty's comments just about the real need to ignite a fire in states like Montana, get the ball rolling, and really start a true grassroots movement across America that will hopefully start getting past rural America and start really hitting home for some of our folks in urban America.
I think one of the most unique things that I've experienced is we did a little listening to around the country, and we started in Missouri or Kansas with a group and tried to bring a diverse group together. I know they came to Billings, and a few of you were there. I think a few of you in the audience, and had a group there. And then we went to California, and I put two different groups together. We have a kind of a long, narrow state where ag production on one side of the state's a little different than the other. And we filled these rooms with a diverse group of agriculture, people who make their living off agriculture. From organic rice farmer that probably lives off subsidies on one hand, he runs 4,000 cows in his other world. We had the grass-fed beef operators in town. We had dairy operators. Dwayne Martin Jr. was in the room, one of the bigger stocker operators in the western United States. Some dairymen. And then we went to Mobile, Alabama, and had one there, and went back up and had another meeting in the Midwest. And one thing that came out of all of those meetings is in agriculture, we do a very bad job telling our story. We need to educate people better. And we do our best in California, and a lot of people are going to giggle when I say this, but with Senator Feinstein dying, we lost one of America's great senators who was a fan of agriculture. Always one of the great ag staffs in Washington, always voted for it with us on water and on some important issues, and that's scary for our state. It's scary as we start to elect our state. But what we learned from these meetings is we've got to unite behind a few very key important issues, and we talked about it. Rusty hit it right on the head. Taxes. In my state, I mentioned land values, before. When you're going to try to compete to buy rangeland to run cows on with tree farmers or grape farmers that are willing to give $30,000 or $40,000 an acre for bare open land before they've planted and put water infrastructure on it, you're in a battle you can't win. And so we've got to find a way in this movement to convince our legislators, to convince Washington, D.C. that they've got to make access to rural America, or to grasslands more available in states like mine, more available where the production can happen, because rural America needs it. It's not just us as producers, it's the small town grocery store, it's a small town gas station. I mean, rural America needs all of us to be profitable, and a lot of it starts there.
Well, I think one of the take-home messages from this producer profitability panel is now is the time for states like Montana and the cattle producers here to really stand up, speak with a loud voice, and to start making a difference. And throughout this fall, my team and I have had some opportunities to visit with other livestock marketing association leaders and members like Joe Goggins and others across America about a new initiative that LMA really spearheaded earlier this year called the Producer Profitability Initiative. And I think it truly is a great opportunity to do exactly that, light a fire and get the talk started out here and get things done.
Yeah, it's about each and every one of you that we visit at a livestock market. This isn't an LMA initiative. This is an industry initiative, and it's something that starts at the producer, at the ranch, at home, when you're at the dinner table talking about what it means. Then you go to town and you talk to about it. Then you go to your local affiliates and you start really emphasizing the need for us to come together. We all have our differences. Our industry's too small and not funded well enough to fight amongst those differences. We have to unite. We have to ignite that fire. We've got to believe in one another. And the grassroots movement's so important because leadership in these national organizations is never going to come together unless their members tell them they have to do so. We're all affected the same way. At a livestock market, if my producers go out of business, I go out of business. At a major organization, Farm Bureau, if their producers go out of business and they lose members, they're suffering. So we're all controlled at the membership level. We're all controlled with the people in this room, and we need the conversation to start there and push upwards. Otherwise, it'll never happen, but it can happen. And I think the ground is set. We've experienced bad times. We've experienced good times. Now, all of a sudden, in the beef industry, there's going to be a lot of fluctuation, they predict, over the next few months. Where are we headed? That's the time this discussion needs to happen. So next time the market swings, there's not as big a reaction.
Rusty, in preparation for today's panel, those of us on stage and plus a few others, we've been talking about what we want to accomplish up here today and get that message started. So hopefully these men and women joining us here in Billings and now listening and watching on some of our programs can really ignite that conversation out there in the countryside. Rusty, but in all seriousness, we really have an opportunity here, and this really could be an industry milestone that our kids and grandkids and great-grandkids could be talking about years from now?
Well, that's possible, and it would be a wonderful goal to achieve. And frankly, I think that's why we're all in this room today, irregardless of the specific topic. It's to make this industry stronger and better. And it's time to start forcing an issue in an organized way to get some real drive behind it, not only from this room, but from every room like it in every state and every other organization. And we have an opportunity, I think, to do that. Because if the listening sessions that Jake referred to told us anything, it's that everybody, regardless of whether you're in the southeast or the northwest or where you're at, it exists, and we need to fix it. And we've got some sediment in Washington that we don't typically have, that's a little concerned about food security, and it's a great time to give it a big shove.
I think one thing we need to think about too is we think about keeping young people in ag production and coming back to the family farm. Rusty and I were chatting earlier. It's also about as much about keeping land in ag production. Maybe it is time for the Parnell family to retire, but how can the Stovall family find a way? How can we incentivize me to sell my ranch to them in a way that they can make it work? Is that through lesser tax burden, things like that? Those are also issues that it's not just about keeping it in the family, it's about keeping that rural America in production and not selling to, I think you guys fight recreation, I fight houses and trees and grapevines, but that's something that we need to be open to too. It's about the bigger picture, ag production going forward, rural America, big grasslands, available.
The one thing is, as we kept brainstorming and all of us trying to come up with ideas, well, the overall elephant in the room is what is the role of government in the livestock industry. And it becomes kind of a tough pill to swallow sometimes, because when we compare, if we're a diverse operation and we have farm ground, there seems to be quite a few tools or options for your farm grounds. Is there adequate amount of tools for livestock producers? Now, every prideful man, I'm just going to leave it at that, in the room would say, well, I do not want the government involved in the livestock industry. Well, then there was some characters in the room that got up and go, well, who did not cash their COVID checks? And I think everybody in the room cashed their COVID checks. And so it really brought up the discussion of what is the role of the government in the livestock industry. Virtually the sediment seems to be in our industries. We just don't want the government at all involved. But to the point is, what is our policy? Should we have voted against the COVID payments? Is that what our membership wanted us to do? Or should we be at the table? And should we be in a more forward position to saying, hey, I want to be able to author this. I have some feedback from our membership that I think can make things better for the future of our industry.
Turk, for as long as I can remember, the Montana Stockgrowers Association has been leaders, not just here within these borders, but across America. We've had several national presidents of different agricultural organizations come from right here in Montana and tackling very important agricultural issues like producer profitability that we're doing here today. But wouldn't you agree, we can sit up here and talk all afternoon about something like this, but at the end of the day, we have to have the guts to do it?
Well, that's it. I think, gosh, it just is an uncomfortable discussion, especially when you start talking about the government being involved, because about everyone around here, I guarantee is going to say, I don't want the government involved. I don't want overreach, or I don't want, and absolutely, that's exactly right. But what do we do in these situations like COVID? That payment to our operation was significant. It actually helped us in a tough time, and it made a difference. And maybe it did keep us going, for at least to have the opportunity to continue to produce. So many times I feel like we just get blindsided of just, this is the only way we can think, and we're not allowed to talk about anything else. And that's what I really loved about the concept, is can we take down the barriers? Can we really look for the future and really say, hey, you know what, this is a safe place to talk about new ideas. And what would it look like? Because I sure would rather want to be at the table of that discussion than to just say, you know what, I'm just out. I don't agree with that at all. Because I almost feel a little bit like a hypocrite. You know, I have farm ground, and I have farms, and I take in government subsidies. You know, I have worked with the government programs, and you know what, I cash the COVID checks. I've also cashed some drought checks. And so am I a hypocrite? You know, that's where I really almost reevaluated myself from this whole discussion starting. And I just feel like it's a chance for us to maybe take down the barriers and create a safe spot for us to actually talk about it and really go to our neighbors and say, what do we need?
Well, and the truth of it is, Turk, the government's involved. They were involved before we were in business. They've been part of agriculture since they've been in existence. And that's all fine. It's not going to go away. We're not going to change that entirely. But we have to find a way to create margin and limit their abuse, for lack of a better term. I mean, I'm not sure it's a bad term to start with, but their abuse of this industry. You know, we have a real opportunity to make things happen, but it's going to require unity. Not just here, but in every organization that's associated with agriculture, because it's clearer with one voice than 100.
And it's going to require guts. It's going to require guts to be the guy that goes out there first, like you said a few minutes ago, Russell, to be the first organization out there and say, these are our priorities. Come with us and follow us. And they will, because the more their producers read about it, the more that we get this message out there, the more effective it'll become, and they'll be forced into it. And these organizations need to, and when I say these organizations, I mean our leadership I mean the Farm Bureau, NCVA, all of these different groups, you know, RCAF, U.S. Cattle, and any group that has influence in our industry, they need to hear it. They need to hear that they need to be in that room and they need to be at the table, because this is more important than some of the minor issues out there.
Well, that's right. And Rusty, I mean, that's why we're having this discussion today as part of this panel, and it's going to be part of this convention's program and what we're going to be talking about for the next few days.
It absolutely is, and there are a million issues facing us, whether it's world trade or fed cattle marketing, or there's a jillion of them. But we have to pick some blocks that we can actually make a win on and advance those forward that have an opportunity to affect the whole industry. Not that any one of those couldn't, but let's handle stuff that allow us to move the next generation closer to the goal of having a shot at doing this.
I find in our state a lot, I don't know why I just thought of this point, but I find in our state a lot, in our organizations, we react a lot in agriculture. And then you look at the big picture, we react a lot. We don't get out there and play offense like Turk said earlier in today. And maybe it's our time to really start shooting for that goal, really trying to move out there and be a leader in front rather than just reacting and trying to survive. And it sounds weird coming from the Californian that our industry is constantly built on reactions in the 40 million people we have, you know, influencing us, but we're trying the same thing there. We're trying to learn how to better tell that story, better make people value what we do rather than chase us off because they think we're, you know, mistreating animals or doing something like that. And it's just the time to me.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, another LMA leader and, of course, leader within the livestock industry, Joe Goggins, he told us all a few days ago, you know, on a conference call, you know, defenses, they win championships. But you know what? Damn it, it's okay to play offense once in a while and also have a score and win from the offensive standpoint, right?
You could just see him shaking on the other end of the
phone. Oh boy,
phone
he got all excited.
Us, yeah.
I mean, I couldn't believe we could hardly, you know, stand it, you know. But Turk, I mean, what are you hoping that comes out of this panel and what we've been talking about for the past, several minutes and now about producer profitability and hopefully igniting that fire, not just here at this convention, but, having these men and women go home into their own communities and talk to their local stock grower groups, their local farm bureaus, their local community events, about doing exactly what we've been talking about.
Well, the big thing is what I want to get from everybody is what do we need? And just really boil it down. What do we really need? And what's going to make a big difference? And can we take down the barriers to be able to expand our thoughts onto maybe into some subjects that we just have absolutely said, I'm not going to talk about it. And that's probably the one thing I've gotten over the last 2 years, because I was the guy that I'm not going to talk about it. But just so happens I cash the checks. And you know what? I do take government subsidies because we do a lot of farming. And so, there was some statistics that was put together. I want to say the farm programs totaled up to over $20 billion for farm programs. And all of the livestock species combined, swine, dairy, and cattle, came up to roughly $250 million. So is that a fair playing field? Are we not doing a good enough job, even in our own organization, saying, you know what, we need some tools here? And I'm not asking for a whole bunch of government subsidies, but we do need to at least say, I want to be at the table to talk about it, and not sit here and go, I'm out. Because I think we need to be at the table, because golly, in the last 3 to 5 years, from the droughts, the grasshoppers, and you put COVID on top of it, we keep running into some variables that I don't think we knew how tough it could get. And so we better be at the table to be able to say, hey, we need some help sometimes. And it's tough to say I need some help.
Absolutely. Boy, there isn't a tougher topic out there than grasshoppers either, so especially here in Montana and other western states. But Rusty, you kind of talked about it a little bit earlier too. I mean, we also really do have an opportunity with a big election and elections coming up in 2024. We're going to have the opportunity to really speak to some new political candidates out there, not just here in Montana, but across America, and get into their ears, and also get into those men and women who are running for re-election, and really start talking to them about what we've been talking about up here, whether it's the estate tax or other important issues, and say, we need a long-term fix on these issues to keep us in food production.
If we look at the history of the world, revolutions are caused by food insecurity. And we're incredibly fortunate in this country, almost unbelievably. Now, that's never been an issue here. But part of what makes food stable here and makes it work is profitability. It's not a bad word. I realize that so much of the world would like to talk about anybody that makes a profit is bad, but it's how the world works. And so if we're going to continue to have the most secure, wholesome food supply in the world, and frankly provide it for a huge chunk of the world, it's going to take the ability to sell our agenda to just exactly the people you're talking to. And frankly, it's an easy sell. It's something that we should have done, should have been better at years ago. I don't know exactly why we're not, but the food security is the key to how we drive this.
Well, and as we wrap up, Jake, I just want to come to you for some final thoughts. I mean, we've been talking a little bit about LMA's Producer Profitability Initiative, but certainly, as you've said time and time again up here, it's not LMA looking for authorship of this particular movement. You're kind of just trying to help ignite that fire out here within these different state and national organizations and get something done.
Yeah, I happen to be on the LMA board, but I'm here as a producer, Russell. I'm here because I believe in this, and I think my biggest challenge to each and every one of you is engagement. I think that's LMA's goal from the beginning, and then step back and let it take its course. I think that whether you agree or disagree, our conventions and our industry aren't like politics today. It's okay to say if you agree. It's okay to say if you don't agree. And the good, valuable discussion we have some ideas, and you guys will discuss some ideas later today. But somebody somewhere in a regional meeting or later this afternoon or at the bar tonight might say something no one else has thought about that is the next great thing moving forward, that we can all unite behind industry-wide to make the producer profitability movement happen. And so that's my biggest thing, is don't just sit there and say, yes, we need it. Engage. Spend 10 minutes on the phone. Read some of the sheets you get. Just let your mind think as you're driving down the road. Something will pop in there, or maybe we're onto it already, but there's going to be an opportunity, or there is an opportunity now, and we need the engagement industry-wide.
Rusty, final thoughts?
I think Jake hit that absolutely square on the head. If we're going to drive this forward, it doesn't take organizations, it takes the people in the organizations to shove it, and that's where everybody in this room comes in.
And Turk?
You know, what I would encourage is for everyone to talk with their district board member and really bring that discussion up, and make sure your board member for your district understands the ideas and stuff that you guys are talking about, so it gets presented to the Stockgrowers board. That is how this is supposed to work. And, you know, just the other thing is, just to share is, you know, a lot of my family's passed away in the last 3 years. And it made me realize that, you know what, we don't have a lot of time. And we better get after it. You know, 2025 is not that far away. And I know we have it on our agendas or anything, but this is a serious deal. We do need to get after it. And we do need to get on offense. And we need to hear from our membership and say, hey, let's get this fixed now.
Well said. Well, gentlemen, I do appreciate each of you for taking time out of your schedules to join us here in Billings this week for the Montana Stockgrowers Association's annual convention. Again, Turk Stovall, Rusty Ellis, and Jake Parnell. And as we've been discussing throughout today's program, this producer profitability panel, the time is now to ignite that fire in rural America and get this grassroots movement underway. And it starts by having the guts to do exactly that. And it starts with discussions like those that are going to take place here these next couple of days with the Montana Stockgrowers and other ag organizations, not just here in Montana, but across America. And as Turk mentioned, here in Montana, if you have questions about what they're trying to accomplish, one of the best bets is just to reach out to that local MSGA board member near you. But for now, that's going to do it for this On the Road feature. For the Western Ag Network, I'm Russell Nemetz.
Western Ag Network on the road at the Montana Stockgrowers Association Convention. Brought to you by Torgeson's Equipment.